Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, the fires of hell were so very bright tonight. The kicking in that game, admittedly, as a Jake Elliott owner in fantasy, I kind of wanted that third missed field goal.
That was outstanding. I was out of control how much, and obviously it didn't end up mattering to the outcome of the game, but for so long it felt like it did.
Yeah, the game would have been much different if he had made those. Let me break down how the Hell League scoring works for kickers as far as Jake Elliott is concerned. For a make of a field goal 20 to 29 yards, you get 10 points. A make of 30 to 39 yards is 15 points. A missed 40 to 49 field goal is minus 10. A missed 50-yarder is minus 5. And a missed point after, the extra point, that is minus 50. So with field goal yards, it's like 0.2 points for every yard. So he ended up with 10.4 points out of that. His total is negative 29.6.
Truly incredible. And we had to actually change the Hell League rules because there was initially minus 25 for missed extra points.
Yep, it wasn't bad enough.
It wasn't bad enough. Yeah, we had to make it minus 50. Because you have to, you see your kicker miss an extra point and you need to enter an existential crisis. That's the goal of the league.
Yes.
And if you can kick your way out of it with a 60-yard field goal, screw that, man.
Nope. Needs to be bad. Needs to be
bad.
Needs to be hilariously awful. And this is a player that every league has signed. Every league has this guy picked up. He's not on anyone's bench. He was starting today for every team in for every league. It is
was it 9 leagues?
Yep. This was the game. I love this so much. It is the worst. Remember, kids, if you're interested in joining the Hell League, contact me in August and I'll make sure you get a place right in hell with me. Oh my God. This was a torturous day. A lot of number one teams are just messed. Glitchy Lauren was just posting screenshots, just talking about how messed up her team is now this week.
Fantastic.
This is a must-win game. It's yeah, well, maybe hope your other kicker carries it. All you can do at that point.
Yeah. And your other kicker can carry it. If you heard the way that the scoring works, if the other kicker has 2 50s and a 60, you're in a great spot. Yeah.
It's not great to have to worry about a negative 30 points on a Thursday night, but you get that out of the way early. And with that, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. We have a game to preview. We have an interview that Reef conducted yesterday with about the Tennessee Titans, so we'll be talking about that here in just a moment. And we have the mailbag as well. But again, thank you guys so much for listening to the show. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode, and for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the year subscription, you get access to the bonus material, you get access to the Discord, all of that, over at Patreon. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well for a one-time donation, or you can go over to our Threadless store, norsecode.threadless.com, and get any number of wonderful holiday-themed shirts, including the Reefs that are back in stock, ready to go. We've got t-shirts, baby onesies, beach towels, bathroom mats, shower curtains. All of these lovely things are available over at the Threadless store. Also worth noting, the Union 32 Craft House, Eagan, Minnesota, December 12th is our next live show. We're giving away 2 tickets to the Bears Monday night game. So check it out, December 12th, Union 32 Craft House in Eagan, Minnesota, about 7:30 or so. We will be giving away 2 tickets to the game after the recording. We also were going to be giving away a number of different Norse Code merch as well. So check us out on December 12th, Thursday night. I like to bring cursed items to the table. I like to bring these things. So Arif has Christmas presents that'll be coming that night too. So you'll want to catch that.
Jesus.
You'll want to see that in person. That will be something that the whole family can enjoy. I'm serious. I think you're going to like this. I think this is...
Every time you mention them and the glee with which you share the fact that you have Christmas items for me suggests to me that actually, because you do not have my best interest at heart, suggests to me that I'm going to hate them.
No. Nothing of the sort.
Okay, yeah. Your tone isn't very convincing.
Your tone is going to change once you open these, okay? This is...
There are going to be great presents. You'll see, and then you'll learn.
Yeah, that is absolutely what is going to happen. You will eat your words. December 12th, Union 32 Craft House in Eagan, Minnesota. What we're going to do now is we're going to go to an interview that Arif conducted earlier about the Titans game. This is from Justin Graver. He is from the Heed the Call podcast and the Titans Film Room. Again, this is an interview that Arif conducted yesterday.
All right. I'm here with Jonathan Graver, who has probably one of the best podcasting jobs on the planet. He is the producer of the Heed the Call podcast. I was also told to talk to him about Titans football. Sounds like you're an expert, man. What's going on?
Hey, I'm good. How's it going, Arif? Thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, no, man, for sure. Just, the Vikings up against the Titans. This is going to be a game that I think a lot of people have a pretty good understanding of what they think is going to happen in the game. I don't know, man. The Vikings are a pretty unpredictable team. The Titans are interesting. I don't know. I'm not going to argue that they're good. The Vikings are favored by 6, but they're like an interesting team to me, right? So this is going to be fun to break down.
Yeah, as a Titans fan and person who covers this team right now, it's been a season of trying to learn, is Will Levis the guy? Is Brian Callahan a good head coach? Can this team compete? I think if you asked me expectations for the Titans back in February, I would have said, oh, they're going to be terrible. It's a rebuild. But then after free agency and after the draft, it felt like, okay, this team thinks they can compete. They're going for it. They're signing all these big name guys, trading for guys like L'Jarius Sneed, and then the product hits the field and it's like, oh no, this is actually the team we thought it would be in February. They're not good at football.
Yeah, they've met expectations and that actually is somehow a disappointment. Yeah, no, for sure.
Right.
There's a lot of things in here that are kind of interesting. I thought, for example, the Titans consistently, grabbed draft Twitter's favorites throughout the draft. It was kind of a fun draft to look at, but obviously that's going to be, something that pays dividends down the road, not necessarily something we'll see right now. And I think the primary question surrounding the Titans, of course, is, what they're doing at quarterback, whether or not they regret letting Malik Willis go. I don't know. And how Will Levis has kind of advanced, because he's somebody that last year was one of those, can't believe he fell into the second round. What's going on? He comes from Liam Cohen's system at Kentucky, who's now, again, in NFL offensive coordinator. Felt like he was kind of prepared to hit the ground running. And, the Callahan offense, as I understand it, it's a West Coast offense. The Cohen offense, as I understand, is a West Coast offense. Correct me if I'm wrong. But that should have meant, a relatively rapid introduction, at least this year, into the system. So what's going right? What's going wrong? Is Mason Rudolph better? ?
All good questions. And Liam Cohen is someone that we had a chance to talk to on our Titans podcast before last season, just about Will Levis, the prospect, before he played an NFL snap. And one thing that's always stuck with me about Levis is that Liam Cohen was very, very high on him and had nothing but good things to say. And this is after Cohen had left Kentucky and was back in the NFL, and I felt like had nothing to gain from lying about his players. If you're still in college and you're recruiting, right, you're going to go out there and say nothing but positive things about all your players. But if you've already left that world, you can be more honest and free and open. And Cohen was very high. He thought that Will Levis would be a successful NFL quarterback. We broke down some of his Kentucky tape, and it was these are the plays that you see that they encourage you, that make you think he can do this at a high level. And he hasn't really done it yet in the NFL. And I think some of the things that have gone right, like he has shown some steady improvement this season. But I think what's frustrating about it is you see some high points, you see some flashes of greatness, and they're simply few and far between. And it's like, why aren't these types of plays happening every time he drops back? And even if that's too high of an expectation, like why not at least half the times he drops back can he not make the right play? I think part of it is a new system that may have some principles that carried over from the last offense and from his college offenses. But he's also a guy that's been in a new system almost every year. He was at Penn State first in college in one system. Then he went to Kentucky with Liam Cohen. Then Cohen left and he was in a different system. Then he was drafted by Mike Vrabel's Titans running a different system. And now Callahan's in. It's his fifth system in 5 years, essentially. And we always seem to give quarterbacks more grace and patience when they're going through so many changes, especially when they're young guys. But I think there's been some element of his head is overflowing and swimming with too many things. And you can see that he's just thinking too much on the field. It takes him too long to process. He's not hitting open receivers. He's not pulling the trigger fast enough. His time to sack rate is high. But the biggest thing, and we've seen improvement in like protecting the ball and taking the check down and all these areas you want to see improvement in. But the one thing we have not seen any improvement in his entire career, and this goes back to Kentucky, is he takes too many sacks. And it's not just taking too many sacks, it's the pressure to sack rate is extremely high. Mason Rudolph played the last 3 games for the Titans before this one, took 5 total sacks. Will Levis took 7 sacks in the game he returned in last weekend. Like, that is too many sacks, and some of them are not avoidable, but none of these sacks happened less than 3.5 seconds after the snap. So they're all long periods where you're holding the ball and you're just either not seeing the guy or not just throwing it out of bounds. Like it had a couple of instances where he could have thrown out of bounds. So all the progress that we're seeing feels stunted and frustrated by this one area of the game that he is not making progress in. And it's a crucial area of the game because you're never going to have the perfect environment with an offensive line that just protects you lights out all game long. That's never going to be a situation for any quarterback in the NFL. So you have to be able to play under pressure and navigate the pocket. And I don't know that he can do that. He definitely can't do that right now. The question is he ever going to be able to do that at a high level? And it's like, it's one of those traits where you kind of are what you are in this category. Like, you don't often see guys get tremendously better at just feeling pressure in the pocket. So it's definitely that, I would say, is the biggest concern about where Levis is at.
It does kind of remind me of, and I'm a Carson Wentz hater, so feel free to completely dismiss what I'm about to say, but it does kind of remind me of like one of the things that when we were talking about Carson Wentz, as he kind of advanced as a passer in 2017 and then regressed after that, one of the primary areas of improvement that he had, aside from like unsustainable play on third down, whatever, was exactly what you're talking about, getting rid of the ball faster, reducing the pressure to sack ratio, which I just did a little fact check on you, and you're right. Number 1 in the NFL right now in pressure to sack ratio.
Wow.
Unless you mess with minimums, and then it's Spencer Rattler, right? But yeah, like 30%, which is crazy. Like, we've got quarterbacks like, it's like, oh my God, unsustainable pressure to sack ratio. It's too low. It's going to come back. And they're like 2%. 9%, right? The average in the NFL is around 19, 18%, something like that. So that is wild. So that's a lot.
It's bad.
So I'm glad you brought that up because that is a ridiculous stat. But you know, we have seen quarterbacks occasionally do this. And in the example I gave, Carson Wentz did that. He got rid of the ball faster. He stopped holding onto the ball too long, and then he just kind of regressed. He never had that again. Mettenberger never learned it. He was always a slow processor. You're very familiar with that. Aaron Rodgers kind of learned it. He actually held onto the ball a fair amount early in his career, and then his sack rate got really low. So we've seen kind of all versions of this development path. And to me, my experience covering the NFL, that is a hard one to fix.
Yeah. We saw... Titans fans have seen it for years. Marcus Mariota always had a high pressure to sack rate. Ryan Tannehill came in, and even in his best years with the Titans, even when they were like the number 1 offense and he had the number 1 EPA and CPOE for quarterbacks, The one thing was the pressure to sack rate was still high, and that was bad when he was with the Dolphins, and it just stayed that way his whole career. And so if you're looking at Will Levis and saying, can this guy improve to the point where he can be a franchise quarterback? Like, he could be so good in all areas, but if the pressure to sack thing is still an issue, what's his ceiling? You know, is it Ryan Tannehill? And is that good enough for where you want this team to go eventually? And I think what is even more frustrating about it is he started this season so poorly. He has not really looked like the guy we saw in flashes last year, the Atlanta game, the Dolphins game, the Steelers game, where he played well. He hasn't had a complete game like that this year. And last week was his closest thing to it. But then again, the 7 sacks. So if he had his week 10 game in week 1, and you're like, okay, we've seen some progress. Like, he's making the right reads. He protected the ball. He hit the downfield throw when it was there, even though he threw it late, the long touchdown to Calvin Ridley, just so wide open that it was okay that he threw it late. If that was happening in week 1, then you'd say, okay, we have some things to take away from this and some areas where there are still concerns. But yeah, now you're 10 weeks into the season. He missed a chunk of games, which he has missed a chunk of games basically every year of his life, dating back to college. So you're worried about durability concerns as well. And it's also just like, how much, like, can he get as much better as we need him to get by week 18 to have a full picture and answer so the Titans know what the heck to do at the position in the offseason? Or is this progress going to be so slow and so incremental that we get to week 18 and we say, well, we've seen some signs. Is it enough to go into another season with him as the starter with no real backup plan? Or do you bring in a bridge guy to compete with him, like a Justin Fields or a Sam Darnold or somebody like that, and turn the reins over to that bridge and then look at the 2026 draft? If the Titans end up picking where they are right now, 3rd overall, do you just take a stab at what is considered to be a weaker quarterback class and hope that you catch lightning in a bottle? Like, if he doesn't show enough progress, he leaves you in this sort of purgatory land where you're like, well, maybe he could still be the guy, or maybe we should draft someone, or maybe we should sign someone, or maybe we should do all 3. Like, that's probably the worst place to be, is to not have the answer. And right now, if you had to give an answer, is he the guy? You'd say no, but it's like a no, but but we have time to find out more information, which that's what the whole season's about, is just getting that information on Will Levis.
Yeah, I think for the Titans, the decision window is a little bit accelerated given how much older as a prospect he is compared to a lot of the other prospects. So, like Jaden Daniels, we found out right away, don't have to worry about his age. Will Levis, kind of older. So, one last question about Levis before we move on. One of the least blitzed quarterbacks in the NFL. I think the explanation you just gave is maybe why, that he's inviting pressure, he's holding onto the ball, stuff like that. And so you don't need to send a blitz in order to get him to the ground. But the Vikings are not making decisions about whether or not to blitz based off of whether or not you can get pressure with 4. It's a critical component to the way they design their defenses. So what do you see happening in this game? The Vikings, the heaviest blitzing team in the league, especially on 1st and 2nd down, but also, of course, like everybody on 3rd down. What do you see going into this game with a heavy blitz scheme that's going to have fewer players in coverage, more open receivers, but are going to require him to make decisions a little bit faster?
It's going to be interesting to see if Brian Flores sticks to his guns there, or if he adjusts based on what has worked for other teams, because I don't think teams are not blitzing Levis for the same reason they don't blitz like an Aaron Rodgers or somebody. Right. It's like, they're not blitzing him because he's going to destroy your blitz like Joe Burrow would or somebody else. Like, they're not blitzing him, like you said, because they don't have to blitz him. They can get pressure without blitzing. And against this Titans offensive line, that does look much improved, especially in week 10 from where it was in week 1, much improved from where it was last year. The right tackle spot is still a huge weakness and maybe one of the worst right tackle spots in the entire NFL. They're literally rotating different guys in the game. And they've been doing that for weeks because they feel like it gives them the best chance, because there isn't one guy who can just hold down that position and even play at like a below average level. Like, they are all really, really bad. And Brian Callahan continues to get asked about the right tackle position. It's like, are you not just going to pick a guy? And he's like, look, we don't have anyone. We don't have any options. Like, we have to just rotate and hope that somebody plays well for 5 snaps at a time. So to answer your question on the blitzing thing, like, the Vikings defense could be very successful playing their style in blitzing, because Will Levis, again, doesn't make very quick decisions, doesn't process very quickly most of the time. You do see it occasionally, like, oh, look at that, he got the ball out quickly. But most of the time, he doesn't do it. So if they blitz him, I feel like it's going to be sack city. It could be turnover city. Is he going to be the guy that like makes the hot read and gets the ball out quickly and turns what could have been a big play for the defense into an explosive for the offense? Like, I really don't think that's going to happen. So I could totally see Flores continuing to play his style and blitzing heavy. I could also see him saying like, you know what, let's just drop more guys into coverage, make this kid's head spin even more, especially with the kind of coverage looks, the pre-snap, post-snap stuff that Flores has been doing all year. I am terrified for what Will Levis is going to look like in this game. And I almost don't want to draw any conclusions because Brian Flores has made more experienced, better quarterbacks look like rookies. And Will Levis, if you think like a rookie as a guy who's played less than 18 games or 17 games at this point, that would be where you classify him still. I don't think Will Levis is going to have much success against this defense. The only chance the Titans have to like be successful in this game is do what the Jags did to Sam Darnold, but score more points on offense.
That was a crazy defensive performance against that turnover production. So it's going to be tough. Well, okay, so you brought up the offensive line. Might as well go there right now. On the injury report right now, Leroy Watson, I believe one of the two right tackles you mentioned as one of those rotational guys, did not participate with a back injury. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if he's like always on the injury report and he continues to play or how the Titans treat that. But the other one is Nicholas Petitfrere, right?
Petitfrere, yeah.
Petitfrere. So I don't respect French as a language, so that's kind of where I'm coming up. Yeah. First of all, how does that injury report kind of impact our understanding what's going to happen there? And if it does impact that, what are the differences between these two tackles? It sounds like neither of them are good, and maybe that's all we need to know. But what are the kind of the differences here that might kind of inform decisions? Like, it sounds like the Vikings are always putting Jonathan Grenard on the best offensive tackle and then just kind of screwing around with the other guy with like a bunch of different pressure looks. So that's probably what's happening at this right tackle position heading into the game. But what are the expectations?
So I'll blow your mind real quick. Nicholas Petitfrere was benched a few weeks ago and hasn't seen the field in a while. He's not even the guy that's rotating with Leroy Watson. It's actually second-year undrafted free agent John Ojukwu who is rotating with Watson. Watson has not been a guy who's been on the injury report this year. This is the first time we've seen him pop up there, I believe, at least not in a few weeks. So it's not like something that he's been dealing with and playing through. This could be a legitimate concern. We'll have to wait and see if he gets upgraded at all on Thursday or Friday to maybe limited or even full. If John Ojukwu has to start this game, that's not good news because he's not very good either. Would the Titans continue to do a rotation and bring Petitfrere back into the fold? I don't know. But he has been terrible. He signed some sort of deal with FanDuel, I think, earlier this year, and everyone is Titans fans are like, "What? Oh no, what's happening?" And this is a guy who was suspended for gambling violations.
I remember
that. It is an absolute mess. Positional value be damned. The Titans need a right tackle more than they need anything else outside of, arguably quarterback, like a real quarterback. Right. But their biggest weakness is right tackle. And if they're not going to pick a right tackle number 3 overall, I don't think, but that's the spot that coming into the season was a concern, and you're wondering what the plan was. And now you're halfway through the season and you're like, oh, there was no plan. Okay, cool. The plan was Bill Callahan make magic. I don't know. There was no plan. So I'm definitely worried. You look at the guys that the Vikings have that have been piling up sacks this year: Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, even what's his name, Patrick, the Pittsburgh guy, Patrick Jones, who's finally coming on after a few years in the league. I don't know. Whoever matches up on right tackle is going to have a nice, fun day, I think.
Great. Okay, so my question then is, there must not be any guard depth either, because you take a look at these guards, Dylan Radins and Peter Skoronski, and both of them during the draft process for each of them had been talked about as potential right tackle candidates given their profile, and this does not seem to be entering into the calculations for the Titans, who are keeping them at guard and don't want to put them at right tackle where there's a severe weakness. Is this because they just want to develop them at those positions, or is it a lack of guard depth, or what is it that's preventing them from kicking either of those two out to right tackle?
I think for Skoronski, it's definitely like, we think this guy can be an all-pro level guard, so we don't want to mess with that. And like, he has been playing very well, especially lately. He struggled a little bit early in the year, but he has been playing like one of their best offensive linemen. JC Latham at left tackle has been their best offensive lineman, which is sort of an indictment on the whole group because he's a rookie.
Right. You're right.
Lloyd Cushenberry was starting at center, so that his Achilles injury that knocked him out for the year definitely affects the guard depth. But I don't actually think it's about the lack of guard depth, because Dylan Radins has also played pretty dang good at right guard. And he's a guy, former second round pick, who was supposed to, he never really got a shot to play much in the Mike Vrabel era. And like, Titans fans cling on to one good game he had against San Francisco where he played left tackle and pretty much neutralized Nick Bosa. But that was I don't know if it was a fluke or what, but he's never played like that since. They tried him a little bit at right tackle in spots last year when they had injury issues, and he's not a good tackle, but he's been a pretty good guard. So for both those guys, I think it's more about like, these guys are succeeding. We have one weakness on the offensive line. Let's not make it two by putting a guy who is not going to be much better at right tackle and then put a backup in at guard. Like, I think it's more about just keeping those guys where they are, because they are actually playing well. And then Daniel Brunskill was like the number 6 offensive lineman guy, like swing guy who could pretty much play guard or tackle. He's played it in his past, but he's never played tackle for the Titans. In his second season now, they've never lined him up at tackle. So I don't know. He now has to play center because Lloyd Cushenberry's out. So there are some injury issues that are affecting that, but I think it's more about like, they had 3 guys that they felt, or even 4 guys that they felt decent about. Like, one of these 4 guys, we put them in a competition, can at least give us serviceable play at right tackle. And the 4th guy is Jalen Duncan, who was a 6th round pick last year, who's now on injured reserve. So his season is over. But yeah, I think it's more about, they're just like hoping we're hoping one of these guys would step up, and nobody could do it.
Okay. So I think that kind of leads us naturally, I think, into the tight end conversation, whether or not they're using tight ends to help out that right guard spot, and why I think I don't know, it feels like there should be more tight end production, but then I'm like looking at, like, I like Chigakwanko, but like, there's not a ton going on here tight end wise. Like, Nick Vannett had some years, was it like Seattle, where he was like the primary tight end and he still didn't get targets. So I kind of understand that that's not, going to be his game, but is Okwonkwo not getting as much production because that's who he is, or is it because he's chipping a lot, or what's happening there?
Yeah, I think it has to do with the way the offense is functioning right now. They are definitely keeping in extra protectors there. But also Chig had a great rookie season, super high efficiency across the board, like yards after catch, yards per reception, yards per route run, broken tackle rate, all these stats that should indicate like, oh, if he gets a bigger role, he should be a game breaker type of player. And he got that bigger role last year, and all of his efficiency numbers plummeted. And he sort of entered the year as like a de facto tight end 1 on this team, but Titans were pretty excited about second-year guy Josh Wiley. And so the two of them have sort of been splitting snaps as the pass-catching tight end. Van Nett has been the primary blocking tight end. And it's like, you see some plays where it's like designed that guy's going to chip and the quarterback's going to roll out and he's going to be like the underneath little check down if you have a free rusher coming in your face. And that play's worked a few times. And Vannett caught a touchdown a couple of weeks ago against the Lions. But overall, it just doesn't seem like it's a very big part of the passing game is having a tight end out there, mismatch or not. And we saw that, 5 years of Brian Callahan in Cincinnati, the tight end was never a big part of his passing game there either. And granted, they had like 3 elite wide receivers, especially when Tyler Boyd was in his younger, more explosive days with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase for most of Callahan's tenure there. So maybe that's why we thought the tight end wasn't a big deal. And a lot of Titans fans were excited about Josh Wiley breaking out this year. And there was a lot of buzz during training camp that he was sort of overtaking Chigakwanko as the tight end 1. But they've sort of both been like tight end 2s, and the Titans kind of just don't have a tight end 1. Like, it's been a disappointing position across the board for the Titans.
Oof. All right, then.
Like many things this right. Titans season.
This is a very bleak podcast. Well, okay, so I want to talk about the skill position players outside of that then. I feel like Tony Pollard is playing above expectations. Maybe it's just because last year was a little bit more disappointing for him. But this feels like a pretty decent group of running backs all the way down to former chief of staff Joshua Kelly. You've got Julius Chestnut, who beat up the Vikings, so maybe that's a little bit too much, exposure for me, and maybe I'm mischaracterizing him. Tajay Spears, same thing. And then Tony Pollard, who's been getting like 60-plus yards in a ton of the games that he's playing in. So can you tell me about this running back group? Are they overperforming, or is that just like me winning in fantasy and then projecting that?
I think there's two factors at play here. Number one, Tony Pollard has been awesome, like absolutely awesome. If you're going to let Derrick Henry walk and watch him run for 1,000 yards in like 8 games and lead the NFL in touchdowns again, the next best thing that you can see happen is Tony Pollard come in and play the way he has played, because he has been really, really good breaking tackles. I'm not sure if this is still true after week 10, but going into week 10, he was leading the league in percentage of his yards that came after contact. So he's not only creating a lot of yards, he's doing it basically on his own at a higher level than anyone else in the NFL. And the Titans run blocking has been something that's like steadily improved week after week. And especially after the first 2 games when Will Levis handed the other team a victory, essentially on a silver platter with just mind-numbingly bad turnovers, you could see a very clear philosophical shift for this team. That's like, okay, we tried to let Will cook and he burned everything down and set the kitchen on fire. So we're going to pivot completely and bring in a new chef. And our new chef is the running game. And we're going to try to just make it as easy as possible on Will by letting these running backs, by making this offense run dominant and run heavy. And I don't think that is Brian Callahan's preferred approach to offense. Like just listening to him talk, right. Looking at what he did in Cincinnati, he was over 60% pass rate basically every year he was in Cincinnati, sometimes as high as like 65% pass to run. And that's sort of how the season started in Tennessee. He's talked philosophically, whether he was with the Bengals or since being hired by the Titans, about how he believes that the teams in this league that pass the ball the best win the most games, and that you have to be able to pass the ball to win. And yet here we see in week 10 a very run dominant Titans team. I think that is a necessity. That is a choice because they do not trust the quarterback and they don't trust the passing game, and they don't trust the offensive line to protect the quarterback and create a functional passing game. So all of those factors have contributed to Tony Pollard just being a workhorse. Tajay Spears missed a few games, which also contributed to it, but Spears has been an electric player. He's a low touch, high explosive type of guy right now in this offense. I think he could probably handle a bigger workload if they gave it to him, but they also just seem to trust Pollard so much that there's no need to give Spears a bigger workload. But he has been a guy that just comes in and gives you a lot of juice, like breaks tackles, makes explosive plays. And both of those guys have been great. Julius Chestnut had to play a little bit because of the Spears injury, and he's just a guy that's going to grind out yards. He's not really a special player, but he's probably one of the better RB3s, maybe, top half of the league RB3. Joshua Kelly, unless I'm mistaken, don't think he's actually taken the field yet for this team, but a pretty decent depth piece for a guy. I mean, he's been a productive player at times in this league. So this is a very good running back room. It's the strength of this offense for sure. And if there's going to be any chance the Titans have a good productive day on offense, it's going to be because these running backs play well on Sunday. But also the Vikings have like the best, if not one of the best run defenses in the NFL too. So this is a strength on strength matchup that should be interesting.
Yeah, should be. I think one thing about this receiver core that's kind of interesting is it looks like one of those receiver cores that if you constructed like an all underrated team, this is kind of like what you get. And it turns out like at some point you need a properly rated receiver to have like a good receiving group, right? Like you can't just have a bunch of guys you kind of like more than other people, right? Like what's going on with this receiver group?
Well, trading DeAndre Hopkins definitely made everyone have to like rise a peg that they probably shouldn't have had to rise to. This is another group that's disappointed Titans fans because he came into the season with Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd, thinking, wow, I know these guys are past their prime, at least Hopkins and Boyd for sure past their prime. Ridley, what is he, 30? Like, so he's not necessarily in his prime either, but missed some time with the suspension and stuff. So it's like, oh, his playing age is younger than his actual age, whatever.
He doesn't have any tread on his tires. Yeah.
So you came into this season thinking this is the best trio of wide receivers that this franchise has ever had, ever. Like, this is incredible. And then you take the field, and whether it's the quarterback play or the offensive line protecting or these guys just not living up to their expectation, like it's been a disappointing group overall. Now, the last few weeks, things have turned around a little bit, at least for Calvin Ridley. And we were wondering, is this because Mason Rudolph came in and made this offense look functional that Calvin Ridley suddenly is being a productive receiver? But then Levis comes back last week and Ridley had one of his, another great day, a long touchdown, a short touchdown in garbage time, but still a nice play, a nice route by him and a really nice throw by Levis on that last touchdown. To the point where you're like, okay, Calvin Ridley is doing what we want him to do. He can be a number one receiver. Tyler Boyd has made plays here and there. But I do think like the age factor, the lack of explosiveness is showing itself more and more every week. He's like a very reliable underneath guy who gets, 2 to 3 targets a game on 3rd and 2 or something like that. And then you have a bunch of guys that, like you said, maybe the all underrated team. I mean, Nick Westbrook-Akina is like Jawan Jennings' target version. Like he's like a guy that's going to be in the right spot. He's going to make plays, especially when you're not expecting him to make plays. But at the end of the day, like he's not beating one-on-one man coverage against the best corners. He's not creating explosive plays for your offense. He's just like a reliable veteran, very, very much like the league average type of player. And then the rest of this room, like Bryce Oliver is a rookie undrafted guy. Jaquan Jackson is a rookie 6th round pick. Like there's not a lot else to work with in this room, and trading away Hopkins kind of exposed the lack of depth here, which was never great to begin with. But now it's like, okay, Nick Westbrook-Akina is a starting wide receiver on an NFL team. That probably means your wide receiver group is not great.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm keeping you super long. I do want to talk about the defense. Let's go back to front on the defense because I want to talk about this cornerback group. L'Jarius Sneed did not practice because of a quad injury. Roger McCreary did not practice because of a knee injury. I mean, that sounds pretty bad. What's the prognosis on whether or not either of them are going to play? What happens if they don't? And kind of who's the third corner? Is it Jarvis Brownlee, a rookie 5th rounder, or kind of what does that look like?
Yeah. So Roger McCreary, another one of those guys that's like he's not been on the injury report much this year, and he's played a lot. So that's definitely one to watch. Definitely concerning. L'Jarius Sneed, it was reported today by Paul Kuharsky that he like hasn't even started like jogging and sprinting and conditioning work on the field to get back from his quad injury. So I would be shocked if he plays. The Titans have been rolling out, like you said, rookie Jarvis Brownlee Jr. has basically been their number one corner this year on the outside. And then Darrell Baker, who they think they claimed off waivers right before the season started, has been getting a lot of snaps as well. 2 guys who are young, who have played some good football, but also like with a 5th round rookie like Jarvis Brownlee, like you're going to get mistakes. You're going to get penalties. He's a physical guy to begin with. He like fits that Denard Wilson cornerback mold, the L'Jarius Sneed type of mold of a guy who's super feisty, super physical and aggressive, but that will lead to more flags, more illegal contact flags, holding penalties, occasional pass interference. So I think he's held up very well given like what's been placed on his shoulders again as a 5th round rookie. But it's definitely exploitable. Do the Titans have somebody that can match up with Justin Jefferson right now, or even Jordan Addison and Jalen Naylor and all the guys that the Vikings have? Like, no, I don't think they do. You didn't mention Cheeto Awuzie, who they signed in the offseason, who got injured very early in the year, and we've barely seen him. So you hope that he can come back soon, but it doesn't look like this week is going to be that week. So, yeah, you're looking at if Roger McCreary doesn't play, you're really getting in a bind because then you're going to have somebody like Trey Avery come up and get snaps, and the Titans have had him on and off the roster over the last few years. Titans fans have some PTSD seeing his name and number on the field.
Oh, man.
So this is a group, like this defense played so well to start the season when they were all healthy, and the secondary especially is so banged up. So yeah, you're probably going to see Jarvis Brownlee Jr., Darrell Baker, and Trey Avery as the starting cornerbacks if McCreary can't go. At safety, they lost Quandre Diggs for the year. He was playing very, very good football, especially like given the expectations as a late signee and his age and everything else, that he was actually playing very well. Now he's done for the year. The Titans let go of Jamal Adams because he was playing like 3 snaps a game, and apparently he wasn't happy with that, so he requested his release, and they were like, okay, sure, see ya. So that signing didn't work out at all. So now you got Amani Hooker, who is still playing very good football for this team, had 2 interceptions against the Patriots in that win. And then Mike Brown, who's just sort of this like guy that is, you'd prefer him if he was just a special teams player, but he's actually played decently well. So I think the safeties have been okay despite the injury to Quandre Diggs. The cornerbacks, though, I mean, you're just like, you're trying to do everything you can to help them. You're not running a lot of man coverage because these guys are not going to hold up in man coverage. And you just kind of have to hope that the pressure can get to the quarterback and that the zone defense, that they have good communication and can play their keys and read the rules and help each other out, because there's nobody in the secondary besides Amani Hooker that's like going to make big plays for your team.
Geez. Okay. Fair enough. At the second level, I think probably before this year, I thought that the Titans have had like a run of linebackers that I felt like were pretty decent, maybe didn't get their due and were pretty good. Now I haven't watched the Titans linebackers this year, so excuse me if I'm relying on old takes, but I know a bunch of Chargers fans and they despise Kenneth Murray. So
yep.
This is a linebacker group that does not fit the mold of, hey man, David Long's kind of, or not, it wasn't David Long, but it's
David Long. Yeah.
It was David Long's kind of good. Right. They had like was it Zach Brown? Was that his name? They had like guys, right? They had guys. Yeah. And now I feel like they don't have guys. Who are these people?
So Jack Gibbons, I think, if I'm not speaking out of turn, is leading the team in tackles right now, at least for the last few weeks, because he hasn't been a full-time starter even this year. But Jack Gibbons is a guy who's like athletically deficient, but very smart. Mike Vrabel used to call him Dr. Gibby. He was an undrafted rookie free agent that like picked up the defense faster than anyone else and was getting first team snaps in training camp. And everyone was like, is this real? Or is Mike Vrabel just like trying to send a message that the guys who work hard in meetings are going to get more time or what? But no, he's actually been a pretty productive player. You see those athletic limitations show up every once in a while. Like last week, he looked like me playing Madden when I'm just rapidly switching player and hitting tackle and just like diving 5 yards away from the player with the ball. So there are those kinds of moments for him. He's not very good in coverage, but he's a good thumping type of downhill linebacker. Kenneth Murray has, I can't even call him a disappointment, because when the signing was announced, Titans fans were like, wait, Kenneth Murray, like the first round bust of the Chargers, Kenneth Murray? Why are we signing him to a contract that's big money for the position group? But he's had his good moments as a blitzer. He's really good as a blitzer. And just like getting after the quarterback in general, he can be good in the run game on early downs when it's like an obvious run call. Sometimes he's a little over aggressive and fills the wrong gap or gets out of his gap, and explosive plays happen right where he should have been. That has happened this year too. He's terrible in coverage. He's terrible in the open field. I mean, we saw Justin Herbert shake him out of his shoes last week alone, but that's been happening to him all season long. So he has like pluses and minuses. The Titans traded for Ernest Jones right before the season started from the Rams.
Oh, that's
Ernest
right.
Jones
God. I totally forgot about that.
He was their best linebacker, and they traded him to Seattle right before the deadline. So he's no longer on the team. They actually got a higher draft pick than what they gave up for him. So good investment, I guess, that paid off. But they could use him right about now. You got Jerome Baker, who you then signed from Seattle after they cut. It was almost like a 1-for-1 trade with the draft picks included. They end up signing Jerome Baker, who hasn't really played much yet. Otis Reese is a guy that has always flashed when he's gotten on the field, but he doesn't get on the field that much. And you wonder if like maybe he's not that great in meetings or not that great in practice, but he's really instinctive on the field. And I've always liked him as a player. I would like to see him play more. James Williams is a 6th round rookie who played a lot last week. He's had some moments, but again, 6th round rookie. Like what do you think you're getting from that? And then Cedric Gray is another rookie who has been on IR all season and might finally, I think he may have been activated.
That's a lot of linebackers. What?
They have a ton of guys, and none of them have like risen up and like cemented themselves as the guy. So they're just, but like, okay, defaulting back to Jack Gibbons, I guess we'll just let Gibbons keep continuing to start because we don't have anyone else stepping up.
All right. And then super quick defensive line. It felt like grabbing T'Vondre Sweat, who I know why he fell to the second round. People didn't love his attitude, didn't seem to get along with Byron Murphy on the Texas defensive line. So you always wonder what that's about. But Jeffrey Simmons, fantastic 3-technique defensive tackle. T'Vondre Sweat, beast of a human, played well when he wanted to. Harold Landry, kind of good, right? Like I kind of like Harold Landry. Arden Key has had moments for sure, right? Like he started out as a bust and then from there has kind of worked his way back into relevance. Sebastian Joseph Day, I've kind of always respected, his ability to just kind of get up and do work. So I like this defensive line group, but I don't know. What are we thinking?
This defensive line group is right now with all the injuries to the secondary, like I think it's the strength of this defense. Now I would say when healthy, it's the cornerback room, but without Snead, without Awuzie, and if McCreary misses this game, then it's like what are we even talking about?
Jesus,
The defensive front, though, is very good. T'Vondre Sweat. So I went to Texas. I watched every snap of T'Vondre Sweat at Texas. Huge fan of his. I think the stuff with Byron Murphy that you're referring to there, and not to be confused with the Vikings.
Not to be confused with, the other Byron Murphy Jr.? You're right.
Yeah. No, the defensive lineman for the Seahawks, Byron Murphy. I think he and Murphy had like a very competitive, who's going to get the most sacks, who's really going to be in the running for the Outland Award trophy or whatever. And so that was just like a friendly competition more than any real animosity. He's been good. He started off the year looking like an absolute steal and a monster, and he's been quieter the last few weeks. And I don't know if he's been facing more double teams or if he just has been playing better competition or just not making the same level of play. Jeffrey Simmons was kind of the opposite. Jeffrey Simmons started the year very quiet. Titans fans were like, just trade him. We're tired of him. He's getting paid so much money. He's not producing. And overreactionary Titans fans who were like, this team sucks. What do we even need Jeffrey Simmons for? He's not even that good. Like, come on, what is up with this? But the last 2 or 3 games, he has reminded us why he gets paid what he gets paid and why he's like essentially the face of the franchise right now with no real stars on offense. And he's been very good, if not great, these last few games. So I definitely expect Jeffrey Simmons to be like the one guy on defense that's making plays, and him and Sweat combined to form a really nasty duo on the interior. Sebastian Joseph Day has had some good moments as well. On the edge unit, like Harold Landry is a good but not great player. He's like what I would call a tier 2 edge rusher. If like the tier 1 guys are, like the Myles Garretts and the Bosas and the Watts and the guys that you can like line up and they're going to beat their man no matter who's lined up across from them, and they're going to make impacts on the game. Harold Landry's more like if you got a backup tackle in, let him go to work. Otherwise, like he's going to be your hustle guy. He's going to be the one who gets the coverage sack then when the quarterback has to hold the ball too long, or if somebody else flushes him out of the pocket, Landry's going to chase him down. High motor, high effort guy who doesn't exactly really win one-on-one pass rushing matchups at the level that you'd want from your highest paid defensive edge rusher. Arden Key is sort of playing in a role that is a little above what he should be. Like he should be a rotational third down type of edge rusher who comes in and spells the main guys and gives you like a fast pass rush package if you want to whip that out. But he's an every down edge right now. He's not a great run defender. He's had some moments too, though. I mean, he's had some sacks where he did beat his man one-on-one very quickly. And you see those plays and you're like, man, I just wish he could do that more consistently. But he's had impact on games at times this year. I think overall, like the Titans could use one of those dominant edges. I mean, who couldn't? Every team in the league could use another dominant edge, but the Titans could really use one because that's like they haven't had a guy that can just win one-on-one on the outside like that. I don't know, since like Javon Curse, maybe Brian Arakpo when he was younger. But it's been a long time since the Titans have seen someone like that on the team.
Well, I told them not to sign Bud Dupree. They didn't listen to me.
That was bad. Clowney, give me a break, man.
Clowney is very good at things that are not generating quick pressure. I'll just say that.
Right. He's a disruptor, but Titans fans signed him. Like when Titans signed him, and the Titans fans when he was signed were hoping like, oh, he's reuniting with Mike Vrabel. He's going to be a game record. He's going to have 10 sacks.
Yeah, that's not his job.
I do think his worst season of his career maybe was the season he spent in Tennessee, though. So is that an organizational issue? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, who's to say? Who's to say? All right, so the Titans are favored by 6. The way that you discussed the team made me think, or not favored, sorry, underdogs by 6. The way you discussed the team made me think that they should be underdogs by like 9.
Yeah,
this was a sad. Of course, the last couple of times, like there were sad podcasts, like the Vikings got taken to task. So who's to say, right? But heading into the game, what do you think kind of like the matchups look like, the outcomes look like? You mentioned like what it looks like on offense for the Titans to win, which is, they benefit from a couple of defensive turnovers and a strong run game. But like, what is kind of the most likely outcome for you in this game?
Most likely to me is like, so one thing the Titans have done very well all season long, and the one place I need to give Brian Callahan a ton of credit, is the scripted portion of the offense has felt unstoppable. Like this team has scored on one of their first few possessions, I think every game this year, even in games they ended up getting blown out in. So realistically, I think this game starts off competitive, closer than maybe Vikings fans want, hope, expect it to be. And then in the second half, things just go off the rails for the Titans. The wheels fall off the wagon. Everyone forgets how to play football at a high level. The defense starts to finally give up the big plays that they'd been limiting all game. The offense starts to go 3 and out. It feels like every time they touch the ball. That's been the recipe, the script, basically, for almost every Titans game this year is strong competitive first quarter, mildly competitive second quarter, and then the second half is like, oh, what did this team get Monstars swapped out at halftime? Like what's happened to them? So I think this will be a competitive game in the first half. And I think in the second half, the Vikings will just start to slowly, not like run away with it, but like slowly build a lead that feels like, oh, okay, the Titans need to do something on this drive. And then they don't. And then it's like, okay, the Vikings have a pretty good lead here now. They'll probably be able to hold it. And then, maybe the Titans get a garbage time touchdown at the end or they don't. I predicted on our podcast that Minnesota will win, what did I say, 24-13. I do think this Titans defense is pretty good, even with all the injuries. I think Sam Darnold's in a little bit of a weird funk right now. I would feel better about the Titans' chances to win this game if the Vikings had blown the doors off Jacksonville. But I feel like because, Darnold threw the 3 picks.
They're going to want it a little bit more?
Yeah. They didn't get in the end zone last week. They probably hit the practice field this week. Like, okay, come on, guys. Let's play the type of football we know we can play, especially against this opponent next week. And they're going to take out the frustrations of their last game on this Titans team on Sunday.
Incredible take. Because Darnold was mad, he's going to be. I love this, dude. Appreciate it, man. Where can people find you?
You can find me, my Titans takes, on Twitter at Titans Film Room, the podcast, the Music City Audible. We're available wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And as the producer of the Heed the Call podcast with Dan Hansis and Mark Sessler, if you've ever heard of Around the NFL or the Around the NFL podcast, Dan and Mark were half of it and then 2/3 of it after Chris Wessling passed away for over a decade. And probably the best podcasters I know. No offense, Arif. You're very, very good.
No, I'm 100% on board with you, man. Absolutely.
So I'm thrilled to be back working with them this season. And I would encourage people, if you like football and like humor in your football, Heed the Call podcast is the one for you.
Incredible vibes. Heed the Call. All right, man. Thanks so much. And I was going to say good luck, but it feels weird.
Yeah. Enjoy the playoffs, Vikings fans. That's what I'll say.
All right, man. Peace out.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from Eric Thompson, who asks, for the Norse code / distraction crossover corner, how does Arif feel now that he's officially Drew McGarry's second favorite Vikings blogger?
Wait, who's his favorite? Is it Eric?
I feel like that's the implication.
Okay, yeah, good for you, Eric. I feel like you don't write anymore, so I don't know if that counts, but yeah, it feels great. Honestly, when Drew DM'd me, I was like, wait, that's not real. There's no way. But yeah, that ruled. I'm really glad. So for people who are unfamiliar, I was on the Defectors podcast, The Distraction Corner. I don't know what it's called, actually. It's The Distraction. And we discussed my gambling piece. We mostly discussed the logistics of cocaine in an MRI. I think we could say that, right, without having to worry about
yes, we can. Anymore. And that's literally what it was about.
Yeah. So that was a ton of fun. I strongly encourage you to listen. Yes. Yeah. Oh, and the game. We did talk about gambling. Mostly we talked about how one does cocaine inside of an MRI machine and it working. So check that out.
It was a great episode. I really enjoyed it. And the fact that Drew McGarry said the name of a podcast I'm on at the very end of it made me fangirl out a little bit. So I was I enjoyed that portion and, all of it. Also, it's worth noting that their mailbag is not nearly as crazy as our mailbag.
It's like a normal mailbag. Like, what's up with that?
Right? I feel like if they would have announced it beforehand, I feel like the people would have come in out of the woodwork and asked more about, bees, witches, and all that. But you'll have to just get that from your regular your 9 to 5 podcast. Racer K asks, last game there were 2+ series that the Vikings started with Akers, and when fairly deep into opponent's territory, they finished with Jones. Before Akers, when planned from plateauing, I feel
platooning.
Yeah, well, platooning the running backs, it doesn't seem like they swapped running backs mid-series. Change in philosophy, or has Jones always been closing?
I'm not going to do the research on this to verify 100%, but my perception has always been that you're correct, Racer K, that this was when they platooned running backs, it was always series by series. And so the running backs would be there for first, second, and third down. There would occasionally be a third down back, but that's not like closing, like you mentioned here, where Jones just took over when they got into the red zone and just plunged downfield on like first down or second down or third down. So, yeah, I wonder if this is a change in philosophy. It might be kind of worth asking. My perception is that Jones is just that much better of a back that I think that they know, obviously, that because he's a running back, he's going to need rest from time to time. And so you're going to want to offload things. But in critical situations, like in the red zone or whatever, or like late in games, like, what happened here when he finally returned to health, you just want him out there. And we saw kind of an immediate difference when he got back into this game because he ran for 8 yards for first and 10 when the Vikings needed to clock it after Akers started struggling despite his strong start with the team in the game. So yeah, I think it is a change of philosophy, and I think it's mostly driven by the fact that Jones is just a substantially better running back.
Next question is from Eli, who asks, most of Darnold's interceptions that I can remember seem to have him sitting in the pocket for an eternity. Does he struggle with improv and decision-making more when the play is breaking down?
Yeah, so I wanted to look this up to see if that was the case. I went over to Fantasy Points. They've got a really nice data suite that allows me to filter by very specific situations. So here I was able to filter by whether or not there was a turnover-worthy throw on the play. So for all throws, Darnold takes 2.87 seconds. Their data is a little bit different than PFF, which I think is a little bit longer, and then a bit different than Next Gen Stats, which I think is at 3.02 seconds or something like that. They all measure the moment of throw at a different point in time. But the point here is the comparison. So I don't really mind that they're all different. So all throws, 2.87 seconds, time to throw. Average depth of target downfield, 9.2 yards, 8.2 yards per attempt. And instead of big time throws, which is the terminology PFF uses, they have something called hero throws. I assume that they're pretty similar. But they involve maybe a little bit more in terms of adjudicating situation and ball placement. But his hero throw percentage is 4.6%, which is above average, but not stellar. So that was for all throws, 2.87 seconds, 9.2 ADOT, 8.2 YPA, 4.60 percentage. So if we only look at non-turnover worthy plays, 2.83 seconds time to throw, so marginally faster, 8.7 average depth of target, so actually quite a bit shorter. 8.6 yards per attempt. So this isn't a shock. We're getting rid of some bad throws. His yards per attempt goes up a little bit. And the hero percentage goes up to 4.8%. Again, not a shock. We're getting rid of some throws. All turnover, so only on turnover worthy throws. So non-turnover worthy 2.83 seconds, turnover worthy 3.59 seconds. So that's a difference of about 0.8 seconds, 0.76, whatever. A really significant difference. So that kind of substantiates Eli's claim. And then the average depth of target is 18.3, downfield. So really deep throws. So 9.2 ADOT on all throws is above average in the NFL. That is a deeper depth of target than most quarterbacks. 18.3 on turnover-worthy plays is wild to me. And then obviously 0% hero throws and 0 YPA because none of his turnover-worthy throws this year have clattered off a defensive back and then landed in the hands of a receiver. So no free yards on those plays. Okay, so with all of that in mind, what does this tell us? This either tells us that the turnover-worthy plays are happening in situations where it kind of doesn't matter and they're arm punts like third and long or Hail Mary situations, which is why you get a deep ADOT, which is why you'd get a long time to throw. And that would be a good suggestion, but we've watched the games. That really hasn't happened. And so it's more likely what Eli is saying, that there is a lot of scrambling going on in these throws, that he's really trying to make the most out of nothing, and he's throwing twice as deep as he normally does on these throws to try and make something of this broken play. And that when the Vikings have broken plays, they tend to ask the receivers to go a little bit deeper as opposed to just kind of cross the field and move in the direction of the quarterback. So I think that tells us kind of all of those things. Does he struggle with improvisational play and decision making more? I think so, a little bit. I think that it's less that he struggles with what to do, which of course he does, but more accurately, I think it's he tries to play hero ball, and we're not capturing the scrambles that are not turnover-worthy plays, and so we're only getting one view of this data and not looking at the other data on plays where he's scrambling or plays where he's got a really long time to throw, because his yards per attempt might actually be really high. So it could actually be worth it, right? If about 70% of your turnover-worthy throws turn into interceptions, which is my experience with the fantasy points data as opposed to the PFF data, which is about 60%. If about 70% of your turnover-worthy throws turn into interceptions, you would just need to generate on very similar types of plays something above 10 yards per attempt to make that worth it. Okay, great. That is possible, and I feel like actually that is kind of what's going on. So really, I think he is just throwing caution to the wind more than struggling with decision making. Now, he does make some kooky decisions. I'm not saying that's not true. That definitely is true. He makes some really stupid decisions. They also make some pretty inspired ones, and I think like sometimes you have to be a little bit stupid to make some of these really inspired decisions, and it works out. For now, I'd argue that it's a net positive. We just happen to be coming off of a game where it wasn't a net positive. But I think on the season, it's been a net positive. So I'm not super worried about it. Definitely something worth monitoring.
Mark has a question. It says, the plan was always to start Darnold this season. If JJ hadn't gotten hurt, do you think Darnold would have gotten benched for him at any point here, or would his level of play and the winning have kept him starting?
Yeah, I don't think he would have gotten benched. O'Connell is the kind of quarterback that lets a coach. Type of quarterback coach. Let's go there. He was technically a quarterback.
He was.
Thank you for the correction, because that is not the role I was suggesting. O'Connell's the type of coach that lets quarterbacks struggle a little bit before making a move. Did that with Dobbs. Did that with Mullins a little bit. And he kind of lets them work through, because quarterbacks can't be in a situation where they think one mistake is going to do it for them. They can't be playing tight like that and being afraid to make big plays. There needs to be some security in their level of play, otherwise they'll turtle, and overall it'll be worse for the team. And he knows that, and so he coaches like that, and he makes decisions based off of that. He doesn't bench people very quickly. There was never a moment where Darnold had struggled for so long that it comes to that. And if you compare Darnold's play to, say, Joshua Dobbs' play before Dobbs got benched, totally different, like worlds apart. On non-turnover worthy plays or non-interceptions, Dobbs on his bad games, his multiple bad games, was also bad. His like non-turnover plays also did not produce very much. They also had negative EPA. Darnold on his non-turnover plays is throwing like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's way different. It's a totally different scenario. And so I don't think he would have been in danger of being benched, because I don't think, like, he's only had 2 games where he's actually played genuinely poorly. And the Jaguars game, as much as it sucked not to score, is not one of them. Most of his throws in that game were good. There were some missed opportunities, of course, and obviously you can't have those interceptions. But in that game, he got punished for his interceptions at a greater proportion than you normally see. And so all of his bad throws got punished. And his good throws, largely quiet. I mean, they generated 400 yards of offense. They actually, the Vikings over the past 2 games have had their 3rd best run in franchise history of first downs per game over those 2 games. So there's no other 2-game stretch in Vikings history aside from, I think, the 2009 Favre era and some other moment in Vikings history where they got more first downs over a 2-game span. Like, they're moving the ball in ways that were not true with Dobbs, in ways that weren't even true with Mullins. And I think that this is just a different category of player. It just sucks to see 3 interceptions in the box score, but that does not define his total play. And so while I wouldn't argue that he played well, he certainly didn't. The interceptions do count, and they figure more largely into our determination of how well he played than the other plays do. I also wouldn't say that he played poorly. It just statistically produced a poor outcome. On most of those plays, he was doing pretty well. So No, I don't think he would have been benched. He's only had a couple of bad games this season, but mostly he's been very good. And I don't think a head coach benches a quarterback that quickly, especially like you mentioned, Mark, after all this winning.
Let's go to Corey, who asks, with McCarthy's injury setback and Darnold likely moving on in 2025, how many minutes to midnight are we from Rodgers becoming our quarterback next year?
Yeah, if we had the doomsday clock out, I don't think we'd be where the doomsday clock actually is, which is like literally minutes to midnight. I think we'd be a couple hours away. McCarthy's, quote unquote setback was not a significant one. There was some swelling in his knee. They performed a procedure to diagnose, not a procedure to repair. And that was a very small incision. So technically a surgery, a very small incision to see kind of what was going on. They found no extra damage. They just needed to reduce the swelling. And so it was a platelet injection. Okay, that's it. Not a huge deal. The Vikings say that his recovery timeline is the same as it was before. I don't know, maybe. That may or may not be true, but I would think that for the most part, we would have heard by now if there was some genuine fear that anything has substantially changed for him. So not a huge injury setback. Darnold is likely moving on in 2025. It would, again, be funny to get another Jets quarterback after Darnold and Favre into the building. But we're a couple hours away. We're not minutes away.
I think the odds are better of us getting Zach Wilson than we would be to getting Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think Rodgers is just going to be committed for the next year contract-wise, so it'd be tough.
Yeah. A second Jet has hit Drew Bledsoe, asks, for the beating Goff corner, is Sam Darnold just a worse version of Goff, or is Goff just a better Sam Darnold?
They don't like play the same game. They just both happen to throw a lot of interceptions in a win. No, they're not very similar quarterbacks at all. Goff takes fewer chances despite having thrown more picks in this past weekend. He plays a lot more traditional and on time. He doesn't have the athleticism or pocket awareness. They're very different quarterbacks, but yeah, I mean, Goff is probably a better quarterback than Darnold.
Next question is from I Hate Carmelin. Sure.
I don't know what that's about. Yeah, sure.
To keep up with the changing media landscape, what Minnesota sports misinformation outlet will Norse Code be purchasing at auction in the coming weeks?
That rules. Okay. So first, it just hit me that Carmelin might just be Carmel, Indiana. I just thought about that. Super rich suburb in Indiana, I think. So sure, hate them all you want. Second, so for people who are unaware, which I got sent a text or a DM about this maybe 8 or 9 times, including one group chat where people just shared it 4 separate times. And we had to be like, just scroll up, Jesus Christ. Where the Onion bought all of the assets for InfoWars. Not just the IP, they did do that. Not just the ancillary products like Brainforce, they did do that. But all of the inventory, the equipment, my understanding is the contracts. And so like Alex Jones like works for them now.
I literally, when I saw because I saw that like right when I woke up, I had to fact check that like 3 times.
Right? Because what are you going to go to the Onion website to find out? Right?
Exactly.
Like wow. But yeah, no, it is true. I learned that from Ben Collins himself. Ben Collins used to be like an MSNBC reporter who did a bunch of like internet culture stuff. His stuff is great. And I've worked with him a little bit, not like in any substantial way to say that, I worked with him, but he rules. And then he became kind of the forward face of a group that bought the Onion, which by the way, the Onion is back. It's so good again. It's incredible. Like it's one of those instances where a corporate acquisition has actually improved the product. And I don't think we've seen that in so long. So awesome. But second, he started calling himself Tim Onion. And so it's been really hard to take his tweets seriously.
Yeah, his tweets about it were great.
Yeah. But yeah, and also he was like, anyone have any idea of what to do with like about 1 million supplements? The Onion, in concert with the Sandy Hook parents, bought InfoWars, because the whole reason that InfoWars was up for sale is because the Sandy Hook parents filed a class action lawsuit against Alex Jones for spreading misinformation about the Sandy Hook massacre, misinformation that included like notions that the children never existed and the parents were crisis actors. Truly awful, damaging stuff. And it ruined their lives because Alex Jones has a huge audience. And so all of these people believing Alex Jones were harassing these parents to like the nth degree. Truly awful stuff. And they worked with the Onion so that the Onion could buy InfoWars. And actually, they took a lower price than the settlement because they wanted the Onion to get it. And so the Onion will be funneling like proceeds and stuff to the parents to pay off the elements of the lawsuit that Alex Jones like couldn't pay off and stuff like that. So that's awesome. Also, I think Norse Code's probably purchasing the NFC North News' Twitter account. You know what I'm talking about, right, James?
I do, actually. The one that likes to post things that are clearly wrong.
Absolutely, obviously wrong.
Yeah. I was going to say that we were going to bring back the city pages.
That's not a misinformation outlet. That just rules.
Yeah, yes. What was it was the city, it was city pages, and there was one other one at the same time in downtown. I cannot remember it.
Oh my God. I could fulfill my dream of being a City Pages food reviewer.
Yeah, see? Everyone wins here.
When I found out that City Pages didn't like cover the cost of meals for the food reviewers, I was like, oh, they're cooked. That sucks, man. They can't even pay for the meals for the food reviews? Insane. That's when you knew.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. Also from I Hate Carmelin, after 2 games against coaches who should have been fired, is getting the opposing coach canned an indicator of success or failure historically? Is it good teams making bad coaches look terrible, or more, I can't believe you lost to them?
I think it's just different. Like, I think from team to team, it's different, because I think the Vikings have been in both scenarios where they were such a bad team that when they beat someone, that team fired the coach because they were like, I cannot believe that. And they've also been in circumstances where they've been so good that they've made a team look so awful that they had to fire their head coach, which is what happened with the Jets. So I think it's just really kind of where your team is at. I think more than anything else, I don't think it's an indicator of anything. I think it's just fun. I think it's fun to say you got coaches fired, that you beat a team so badly that they fired coaches. It's kind of like the same thing with, like, I remember the Seahawks used to have this, and the Detroit Lions have it now, where it's like, oh, teams that play X team lose their next game, or, you know, teams that play the Detroit Lions are 0-6 in their next game. And it feels fun. It doesn't really mean anything, but like the implication is like, we beat them so bad they couldn't recover. It was such a physical game, and they're too tired. They're playing the next game and they lose. I mean, it's random, actually, is what happens. But it feels cool. And I think what's happening here is that it feels cool. So that's all it means.
Next question is from BlackRock Sports Group, who asks, for the is Brian Flores washed corner, there continues to be talk about whether Flores is washed or not. This has me thinking, how does Brian Flores get washed? Is he a cold shower guy, or do we think he secretly has a bubble bath with a glass of wine?
He definitely strikes me as a cold shower guy. I certainly imagine that he enjoys a nice glass of wine, but probably not in a long bath. He strikes me as somebody who would want to be efficient yet clean, and I think a cold shower does that. Like, I think you can get everything you need done, and you're motivated to finish quickly. It might also wake you up, so you can be a little bit productive afterwards. But I don't think that he spends a lot of time. And so I don't think it's a bubble bath and wine situation. I think it's a cold shower. Don't even have a shower beer. Just get out and then wine later.
I bet that it is very much. I bet his version of blitzing is to go and take the cold shower. Like that's his like way of waking up. Or he is the sort of psycho that turns the shower on, doesn't test what the temperature of the water is, and just jumps in.
Oh, that is psycho.
That is unhinged behavior. People do this. I bet Brian Flores is one of them.
I can't. I'm like testing every moment before I can I'm like, okay, we can move it like a little bit. No, too cold. Move it a little bit.
Yep.
No, I can't. Unhinged, unreal, inhuman. If you do this, I'm judging you.
Someone who disguises all of his looks on game day. Yeah, this is the sort of behavior that comes with that. Somebody in the media needs to ask this question. Also from BlackRock Sports Group, people often talk about teams, quote, peaking at the right time. Is there any evidence to support this idea and whether or not it's real? If so, did the Vikings peak at the start of the season and there was just no way to maintain that? Or is this just the natural ebb and flow over the course of the season and there's no reason to believe things could, pick back up approaching the playoffs? Or rather, there is reason to believe that. Right. Thinking about this both for Darnold specifically as well as the whole team.
No, there's not any evidence of that. So this has been studied a couple of times, specifically in the context of evaluating week-to-week momentum. So if you're an 11-6 team or whatever, right, 13-4, and your best games came at the end of the season, it might stand to reason that in the playoffs you'll play at a higher level than a similarly talented team, a team with similar statistics and similar win totals, and maybe a similar seed situation would if their final couple of games were worse, maybe the worst games that they had all year. And the evidence suggests that that's not the case. No matter kind of what statistical category you use, net passer rating, net adjusted net yards per attempt, net EPA, wins, losses, that kind of thing. And there's no really good evidence of that. And we actually recently have seen a team win a Super Bowl like that. The Los Angeles Rams, Matthew Stafford, finished the season awful relative to their level of performance. Matthew Stafford lost all the MVP hype that he had in the final 3-4 weeks of the season, and then they won the Super Bowl, right? The same thing kind of happened with the, I think it was the 2007, not the 2011, but the 2007 Giants that beat the Patriots, right? They finished the season pretty weak. In fact, they lost to the Patriots. Mind you, that was the closest game the Patriots played all year, so mileage may vary on what counts as peaking, what doesn't. But they quote unquote got hot in the playoffs or whatever. So no, I don't think there's really any evidence that would suggest that. You tend to play close to your season long average, barring some sort of catastrophic injury or something like that. And the streaks are just products of variance. The nature of the playoff system is that someone necessarily has to go on a streak. So it's going to look like that team is hot, but you could, run a simulation where the outcomes are completely random, flip a coin a bunch of times. And the team that wins the Super Bowl in your literal flip a coin scenario is going to look like it had momentum. When really that's just the way variance works, and that's the way the playoff structure works, where someone has to win all the games by the design of the tournament. So no, we don't have any evidence that the peaking at the right time thing is necessarily true on a macro sense. I would imagine that teams and players think it's true, and I don't really want to discount their experiences with that. But I think that the way it manifests is a lot different for them than it is from ways that we can detect from the outside. So it could be true in a sense that is undetectable by us, which to me suggests it's not really a great vector of analysis for us.
This next one is a throwback question because I can't remember if it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago when this happened. But for the Cruz Azul corner, what does it mean for the Vikings that this season Cruz Azul set the record for the most points ever in the Elijah MX Apertura season?
Incredible work, James.
I do what I can. I'm confident I messed that up poorly.
Yeah, so that's in Spanish, and it is a Mexican league, so it's the Liga MX Apertura. So the Mexican league system is a little bit interesting. It's divided into 2 seasons, the opening, the Apertura, and the closing, the Closera. I don't know what it's called. And so it's 2 essentially tournaments. And then you've got 2 champions over the course of the year. And there's a whole process for figuring out the season long or the year long champion. But first half, Cruz Azul set the record for the most points ever. What does it mean for the Vikings? That all of the kicker magic has gone south of the border, right? That makes sense, right? Well, Reichardt's not kicking because he got hurt. When he comes back in a couple of weeks, the magic will be gone. I don't want a sentence like the Mexican stole it. That sounds pretty bad. So instead I'll say Cruz Azul absconded with it. That sounds better, right? That's not.
I feel like that softens it. Yeah.
Yeah. They've captured it.
We're starting to lean into an, all right, whatever. We're going from Spanish to Canada, where I feel more at home. So Nolan Kaler asks, for North Code, podcast listeners are in for a great Sunday of football as our Blue Bombers get set for their 5th straight Grey Cup after the Vikings take on the Titans. However, Canadians from coast to coast are concerned, I forgot about the island, are concerned about the welfare of not only our brothers in Bud Grant, but of the league as a whole because of Arif's constant dismissal of and bad vibes toward the superior game. Which Canadian amulet do I need to acquire before Sunday to ensure that Arif's passive-aggressive hex is warded off and that Norse Code's favorite, and that's spelled with a U, team is victorious?
Okay, so I took this question in dark places before the show. I'm not going to go there. That was pretty bad. But no, I don't. They seem pretty curse-proof to me, is what I'm saying. As you've pointed out, this would be their 5th straight Grey Cup. I feel like they're doing all right, despite the fact that I have perpetually dismissed them and the quote-unquote superior game. So probably you don't need anything, and or you already have it, and you're fine. Again, magic is not real. Curses don't exist. There is no hex. We've had that stance for a while.
Do you feel better now?
No, but we're going to have to move on anyway.
Yeah. Sean asks, how would you pitch people to switch from X, the everything app, to a small text-based media platform like Blue Sky? It's actually more than just text-based, but it...
Well, I mean, for the purposes of the question, it's like a well-constructed kind of joke.
Yes.
So.
I mean, look, I've started to post more on Blue Sky. I only do like mailbag and like a couple of other things on the Twitter account right now. But otherwise, I'm trying to do more things on Blue Sky. Eventually, I don't post anything politic-oriented on the Norse Code page. I don't. And personal politics aside, like, I never do that. It's the show's account. Why would I, like, personally try to alienate any of our listeners on that? Arif does a fine enough job on his own, on his personal account. I don't need to put a hat on a hat. And I finally just got sick of all of the only ads you ever see were like far right wing, whatever. But I finally got sick of like the random accounts that would just enter my feed, even when I was going to following, that were political for no reason. And were identifying with some politics that I definitely did not sign up for. And I'm getting absolutely none of that in Blue Sky. So if you are trying to use the platform on Twitter for something and it is trying to force you in a different direction that you are absolutely not interested in whatsoever, Blue Sky is easy to sign up on. And it's exploding, as was evidenced by the server problems this morning. But it's just so weird. I was like one of the first users of Blue Sky. So I'm like, I have an official tag somewhere that I'm tagged as a Blue Sky elder. I got a little graphic telling me I signed up as like I'm user number 43,000 or something like that. So I don't know the guy, but my tweets are boosted to him and vice versa. Tweets, Skeets. They're Sky tweets, Skeets. And so I was able to see a lot of his discussion of this, and I guess it actually is not like a server load problem, according to him. I have actually no reason to believe he's being dishonest, even though like
all of our experience with tech is that they are lying to us all the time. So keep that in mind. But I don't actually think he's lying. Someone cut the fiber feed to one of the ISPs. And so that's why different elements would work at different times because they're routing in different ways. So the app goes to like a separate node in the network and then to the ISP, whereas the web goes to a different node in the network and then to the ISP. And so the web app would work and not the app at some point, and like vice versa. So I don't know, it was kind of weird. So it might not actually have been a server load thing, but it just did happen to come at the time when 1 million people, they've got like 15 million people now. It was the top app in the App Store. Anyway, it rules for all the reasons that James talked about. But also like, and this will change. So keep that in mind. But like, I don't know if any of you noticed, but like people are dicks to me on Twitter all the time, like constantly. And that's just not what's happening on Blue Sky. So far, I've had like a couple of people disagree with me and we just kind of resolved it. Again, that's going to change, right? Some of it's just like, I'm a new environment, I'm happy. And that like kind of keeps you in a place where you're just not immediately going attack mode. But like Twitter kept on encouraging people to be dicks, and that filtered through the whole atmosphere of the app. And so that's the environment that they're in. That's the social language that people use on Twitter, is to just be dickish. And I've been on Blue Sky for a while. I've been on there since like, I think I've been on there for like a year and a half. And it's been like that. Again, it's going to change as more people come on, but like there's better moderation tools. There's like a different, they have an established culture, and having an established culture changes the tone of what's happening. It's all completely different. And that I think is a great selling point. Like, yeah, you see a lot fewer bots. In fact, no bots as far as I can tell, even though it's open to APIs and automation in a way that Twitter isn't. Especially no like unwanted porn bots, which is like so annoying. Like, I mean, I know all of you know this, but it's just like I'm in line at the bank, right? I am just scrolling on my normal account. I don't follow anybody who posts risque content, and then suddenly one of the ads is just someone getting railed. I don't need that. I'm at the bank, right? I can't be seen in public with this on my phone screen. Oh my God. So there's that. And then there's also like the clear like push that the app is making towards a particular political framework, one which I obviously disagree with, which makes it worse, but also just like feels like, look, if I wanted to be there, I'd be there. You don't need to push it for me. So all of that sucks. Blue Sky's great. It is a web platform that over the past year and a half, I've noticed is really uncomfortable with growing quickly, and suddenly they did. And so their feature integration is really slow. Part of that is because they're careful. That's great. Part of it's because they got a very small dev team and they don't want to overwork them. And that is kind of great. They're always open to like new applicants, but it seems like they're pretty slow to hire people. Again, probably a good thing, but it does mean that it's not a frictionless experience. It took forever to be able to upload GIFs. Like, you have no idea what that website was like before not having GIFs. It was crazy. And then it took even longer to not have video. So they were kind of really lucky that at this moment, everybody wanted to switch, that they actually had video and GIFs at that time. Because that's like kind of recent. They only just recently introduced DMs. Like, it is like, there's a bunch of stuff that's happening. Their search is not as robust as Twitter search was a couple months ago, before it like almost irreparably broken. And some of the buttons just kind of don't work in the Android app. Like, it's just not a frictionless experience yet. So there's like a lot more that needs to be done. But what's really nice is that users can create features and then graft them into Blue Sky. It rules. The starter pack feature rules, where people have put together like, hey, if you're here from Vikings Twitter, we've got all of Vikings Twitter in the starter pack. Or more accurately, everybody I liked in Vikings Twitter, I put in my starter pack. But you can find like Viking starter packs and follow everyone immediately. You don't have to go searching for them. That's really cool. You've got custom feed options where people can produce their own feeds and like have them on different parts of your home deck and stuff like that. They have a tweet deck. It's just, I think it's just deck.blue or something like that. And it's really customizable. It's awesome. Also another element of friction versus frictionlessness. They don't reload automatically. You have to reload manually. and then the TweetDeck thing only refreshes every 30 seconds. That's going to have to be fixed. That is kind of the easiest place to cut costs when you're a startup, is to not have instant refresh, because that's a huge load on your server. But that is going to have to be fixed, especially on game day. So that's I love Blue Sky, but there's like a lot that needs to happen, and I don't want people to go in with expectations that like don't match what the experience is.
Absolutely. It's I'm enjoying the as it's supposed to be, a bit of fresh air.
Yeah.
That is absolutely what I'm experiencing over there. Mr. Biggles asks, for Reefs, it was all just a meme corner. What is the significance of 80s icon Alf to the lore of Blue Sky? I keep seeing references, but I don't understand what's going on. By the way, we have fully gone off the rails for the rest of this episode.
Yeah, if you haven't noticed. Okay, so let me do this in a way that like works with the family-friendly nature of this podcast. 80s icon Alf, there was a skeet. Again, that's just what they're called. Technically, Blue Sky doesn't call them that, by the way. Blue Sky just calls them posts. But I think it was Patton Oswalt who's like, they're called skeets now, and everyone was like, "You're right. That's true, Patton Oswalt. You nailed it. They're called skeets." And then Jake Tapper said skeets on air on MSNBC. They're skeets now. So he's a Blue Sky nerd, by the way. It's crazy. But someone photoshopped Alf sitting behind Nancy Reagan while she was giving a speech. And I don't know if anyone knows what the Nancy Reagan memes are. I can say the nickname without it being...
I mean, she's a goat of sorts, is what...
right.
Yeah.
Right. You know how, like, people who eat hot dogs really fast are called glizzy gobblers? Unrelated. I just brought that up for no reason.
No, now you do, and
because
I'm sorry.
They're called glizzies.
I'm sorry that this is this knowledge has now entered your head.
Anyway, that is unrelated to the reputation that Nancy Reagan had developed for herself. Just saying. But Alf is there, and someone was like, "Oh, you know, Alf wants it," and then it just kind of took off. And so there's been a lot of Alf posting. When somebody tried to explain the Alf meme on Blue Sky and hadn't been there for very long, and so he's like, "Well, this is what I took from it," and did not realize that Alf was in alien life form, which is what that stands for, from a sitcom in the 80s, which, I mean, I wasn't alive while Alf was running, and I still feel old that this person did not know who Alf was, right? like, Jesus. But, was like, Alf is this hog, and it's like, okay, no, actually the reason you're seeing the words Alf and hog together are not because Alf is a hog. Oh my God. Oh no. So anyway, if you kind of know why somebody would see those words together, now you know how it pertains to the lore of Blue Sky. Next question, please.
So before the show, I had mentioned that there was an account that said you can steal classic tweets and post them here as your own. Watch this.
God, so funny.
The tweet they had done is, "You're telling me a shrimp fried this rice." I immediately went to "The moon is haunted." Somebody else,
that's a good one. Yeah.
Somebody else did my "not involved in human trafficking" t-shirt. There's a lot of people asking questions already answered by my shirt.
I like put together all of my favorite tweets and put them together in a gallery on Threads. So I'll just steal those from Threads onto Blue Sky.
There you go. Let's go to Drunken Vike, who asks, for a Reef's Caffeination Corner, what is the worst thing you can put into coffee that would actually taste good?
So I couldn't think of a good answer to this. And I remembered that there's a red eye gravy for certain parts of the South for like, I think it's like slices of ham that you fry up in the morning for breakfast. And it has a little bit of coffee in it. And I made it once and it was outstanding. It like very much tastes like coffee and like a thin gravy, but it very much tastes like that. And I was shocked at how good it was, especially when it had like, you know, the juices from the ham. Incredible. So I don't know what the answer is, because this is more putting coffee in things, and coffee in things that you wouldn't expect actually goes really hard. It's awesome. But in the spirit of the question, now it is thin gravy. Put thin gravy in your coffee.
I don't know how to respond to that. That's
Look, it has to sound gross. The nature of the question.
I'm aware. Well, let's torture you then. From the mailman, for Reef's time is a construct construction corner. Last episode, you discussed your travels in time. 3-part question. What is your vehicle for time travel? Is it in a garage? And can you please address the concerns that a strange time glitch may have caused the new man on the Minnesota Vikings to be Pookie himself?
Okay, first of all, time glitches are handled by a completely different. There's a whole thing. We had a Marvel show about it. Time glitches are just handled by their own kind of law enforcement. So I can't speak to that. I can't answer that. You're a mailman. So you know that the Postal Service has their own Secret Service. They have their own SWAT team. So it's kind of like that. I can't really speak to that. You don't really want to cross the postal investigators. I think that's what they're called, the postal investigators.
Yes.
What a great TV show concept. Do that. But my understanding is that they're extremely good at their job and they close like 95% of cases. This is like that. Second, screw you about the garage question. Third, vehicle for time travel. That's classified information, but it is not a telephone booth or a DeLorean.
I was actually going to suggest it was one of the electric mail carrier vehicles.
The ones that look like ducks?
Yes.
Yeah, no comment.
So, yes, that is exactly what that is. Kyle Segal asks, with venture capitalists now in charge of our economy, do you recommend doing fake swipes at the self-checkout or to stack items and get the old 2-for-1?
Okay, so first of all, I would never advocate for crimes on a recorded platform like this podcast. I would never do that. Theoretically, were I to do that, I would suggest not doing it in any Minneapolis targets. Absolutely not. Because they have a long history of working with the police to develop their surveillance technology, specifically using Minneapolis targets as their breeding ground or practice ground, right? For generating new methods of surveillance. And what they'll do is they'll wait until the amount of stuff that you've stolen, you don't even know you're being surveilled because the cameras that you see are not the cameras that they're using. It just sounds so conspiratorial, but it's just like documented. But they wait until you've stolen enough stuff for it to constitute a felony and then clap you then. So they'll just wait. So don't do it at all. If you live in Minneapolis, don't do it in a Target. Third, you need to be cognizant of the rule of the way that the technology works in terms of the camera that's looking at you from the checkout, the camera that's looking above you, and the weight, right? Because if you're in a self-checkout and you scan something, the thing you scanned has an acceptable range of weight that when you put it on like the packing area, it's going to try to detect if that is the correct weight. And any changes in weight are something that they're going to try to detect. So be cognizant of that too. That said, once you've accounted for all of these things, I'm not going to say in my experience because I wouldn't cop to anything like that. But from my understanding, stacking the items works better than the swipes, is all I'm saying. I'm also going to point out that from my understanding, the one person who's like literally just like employed there to watch the self-checkout does not care at all. Don't worry about them. Just don't make it obvious because, if you make it obvious, then it's a whole problem. They got to care. But they really don't care. So that's the other thing. Anyway, I would never recommend doing that, but especially not in Minneapolis. But if you did do it, probably stack the items.
And if you're going to do this, the only advice we do have is to make sure to wear your friendly Luke Braun mask.
Yeah, of course. Everybody knows, but the Luke Braun mask for sure.
Let's go to Noah, who asks, for Arif's culinary conflict corner, what is your plan for combating turkey consumption this year?
Not eating turkey. It's look, people ask me about turkey and I give them my opinion. It's not like I'm not attempting to cause people to stop eating turkey, at least not anymore. It's just people ask me about it. I give my opinion. I feel very strongly about my opinion. But if you choose to eat turkey on Thanksgiving, that's your problem. I'm not solving your problems for you. And yeah, problem, not like your choice. Like it's your problem. You're creating problems for yourself. That's on you. It's not me. I'm not your dad. So it's not about global turkey consumption, local turkey consumption, or anything like that. It's just not a reef turkey consumption. And I got to tell you, I've been batting 1,000 on that.
I just want to name an episode I'm Not Your Dad.
Not Your Daddy podcast.
that actually. Also, I do want to point out that it turned out Sam Darnold was not, in fact, Pookie.
Who was it? Yeah, so I have not been keeping up.
It was an actual boyfriend that she had.
A non-famous one, I assume.
Friends with benefits. He appeared. I love that. While I do not follow that podcast at all, that was like a bunch of like, that's all I saw that morning was posts about that, and I just sat there and went, I am so tired of this world.
But also like it's so random that it was Sam Darnold as one of the four.
Yeah,
right. Like Morgan Wallen made sense. She's from the South. He's a country star. Fine. Sam Darnold? What?
Sam Darnold, the Pookie who wasn't.
Pookie who wasn't.
Let's go to Football's Misandrous Niche, who asks, for a Reef's bird racism corner, is your hatred of turkeys, does that originate from the East Coast tradition of wasps obliterating their habitat and replacing it with Gillette Stadium, or from West Coast Peter Thiel money that has sent you on a neo-reactionary, anti-egalitarian poultry crusade? Is there a Tyson chicken connection?
Okay, one, Tyson sells turkey. There's no reason for them to. They sell turkey. I promise you, they sell turkey. So that there's not. You can't build that conspiracy around that. Two, I'm sorry. It's racist against turkeys to refuse to kill and eat them. That's crazy to me. Why would it be racist to not want to kill them? That's wild. Absolutely not. Three, I feel like I've explained this before, but I did technically, for a while, receive Peter Thiel money. Because before The Athletic was sold to the New York Times, one of the investment partners included a group that on that group had Peter Thiel on it. Now, all of us were like, hey, that's pretty screwed up. We shouldn't take Peter Thiel money. He is killing journalism, right? Because if people are unfamiliar, Deadspin ran a story. I think it was Deadspin. It's somewhere in the Gizmodo family. Deadspin or Gawker or someone ran a story. Okay, it was Gawker, right? Ran a story, and they shouldn't have done this, but I'm not defending them. That essentially outed Peter Thiel. Why? Just why? Why would you do that? And Peter Thiel tried suing them, and it didn't work. And so later, when I think this time it was Deadspin, but again, someone in the Gawker family, the Gizmodo family,
it was Gawker.
It's always
Gawker. And in this case, it was Hulk Hogan.
Oh, it was Hulk Hogan. That's right. Yeah. Hulk Hogan video. He says some slurs. He's drunk. Eats a hamburger. He's naked? Question mark?
Sex tape.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a different one. It's a sex tape. And they ran it again. Why? Why? But okay. And so Peter Thiel funded Hulk Hogan's lawsuit against them and took them for everything. And that like crashed that whole section of media. Obviously, Gawker shouldn't have done those things. They should be like punished for doing those things. I'm fine with that. The degree of punishment was crazy, and it just killed whole verticals and stacks of journalism. And so we were like, hey man, let's not do that. So there's like a whole deal where Peter Thiel, this is all public information, by the way. Like I'm not like violating an NDA. Peter Thiel like had to write a thing saying actually he wasn't involved and he's not going to be involved. And I think he also said like not any of his money is but it's like an investment group. So that doesn't make sense to me. But he's not going to make any decisions regarding investments regarding journalism. So technically, I did take Peter Thiel money, and that it didn't feel good, but it also didn't impact my journalism at all, I guess. Anyway, that has nothing to do with turkeys. I just felt like I had to say that for some reason. Maybe I shouldn't have said that.
I have a feeling it'll come up next mailbag if anybody listens to this episode.
Yeah,
so.
Good work, Arif.
Room Bull Sharif asks, which organizations should I try to infiltrate in order to influence future Viking success? The Freemasons or Scientology? Scientology is a lot easier to get into, much like a vampire.
Yeah, they want you.
Yeah, much like a vampire, you need to like be invited to be a Freemason. So
yeah, so Scientology, infiltrate might even be the wrong word because you just invited in. But it costs a lot of money because that's the whole point. They're trying to take your money. I don't mean to offend any Scientologists who listen to this podcast, but also
I do.
Hey, if you're a Scientologist and you're listening to the podcast, mean this with all the kindness and empathy in the world. You got tricked to get out. But unless you're like in Sea Org, in which case you're doing the tricking. What are you doing listening to this podcast? Also, what happened to that guy's wife? Holy crap.
Shelley Miscavige. Where is she?
Yeah, where is she?
Minerva's sleeping.
So, I think that probably Scientology does not influence the organization of the Vikings. There's a much better chance that the Freemasons do. And so, again, more difficult to infiltrate the Freemasons. A little bit easier now in the internet age, but still more difficult. But if you could do it, that's the one where you get to influence the nature of the Vikings. And in theory, their success, if your influence is positive, I suppose.
Yeah. The only way that you're going to end up influencing the Vikings through Scientology is going to be through some dumb way of like you bought some land that Ziggy Wolf wanted to buy. And now you're like,
I'm not telling it to you unless you draft JJ McCarthy.
Exactly. Like it's going to turn into some situation like that. That's Scientology is all thetans and real estate now. So let's go to Kyle Slaby for another question that's just going to be the best thing I've ever read aloud, right, and is going to be absolutely pronounced correctly. For Arif's Anime Corner, the most recent adaptation of Junji Ito's work, Uzumaki, started brilliantly and seemed to finally be the adaptation horror and manga fans were waiting for. But episode 2 was such a poorly animated and paced follow-up that it felt like a completely different project. Which Viking, historical or current, can be considered the Uzumaki 2024 of the franchise?
Honestly, your pronunciations on that were all close enough that it's good enough. You don't need to, you're fine. Junji Ito's work, Uzumaki, is a series of extremely well-received manga. This is based on my research. I wouldn't know this on my own or based on my own experiences. Extremely well-received horror manga. The iconic, like the representative of the genre, right? I would compare it to like Stephen King, except Stephen King is like more prolific and really people only kind of talk about the hits. But like my understanding of Junji Ito is like, there's not as many, and they're all bangers from a horror perspective. Notoriously difficult to adapt, in part because of the really detailed line work in the art that is really important to the storytelling. And so you need to replicate that in the other mediums that you're adapting it to. Just really tough. Also, fun fact, the meme, "This is my hole, I belong here," not the Adam Sandler one, which is "This is your home." That's a different one. But "This is my hole." That's a Junji Ito work. Again, just based off of research, and I haven't, this is what people are telling me, right? So Uzumaki, the first episode, extremely well received, extremely well animated, really replicated a lot of the attention to detail that actually made Junji Ito's work stand out. It really, the detail is a really critical component, whereas a lot of other manga or light novels or webcomics or whatever, when they get adapted, a lot of the stuff that you need to adapt just doesn't cost as much to adapt because it's based off of character work and storytelling, or it uses really simple line art, and the simplicity of its line art is its strength. So again, based off of what people tell me, really good examples of this would be like One Punch Man and Mob Psycho, both the same artist. But it's a really important element of Junji Ito's work. So the first episode, really well paced, really well animated. Essentially, I think they might have rotoscoped, which is really painstaking and not something you often do in 2024 animation, but really well received. Episode 2 looked like if you if you did like you remember how the South Park's pilot, they use construction paper?
Yes.
Remember that? Yeah, it's like that. By the way, after South Park's pilot, they used the same CGI software that was used on Jurassic Park, but they just kept the construction paper art style. Incredible.
Yeah.
But it's like that. It's like it was all construction paper. Like there's virtually no animation, right? Like by the technical definition of the word, there's animation, right? But there's far fewer frames. The line art isn't there. There's no attention to detail. It's like a completely different show, like the question said. So why did this happen? Again, I've got no idea. I'm relying on rumors from the grapevine. But rumors suggest, one, that the studio was aware that this was going to happen because somebody was screwing them. Somebody higher up in the production chain was screwing them. So after the first episode, they were in a spot where they were like, okay, we could either release none of it, just the first episode, or all 4 episodes, and respect the work that we did. So they did that, and no one respected that. No one was happy about it. It seems as if there's a rumor that it was a different production studio on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th episodes, and that they outsourced it. I don't actually know if that's true. And very often, it seems like in these cases, people will blame outsourcing when that's not necessarily the case. And also, there's a lot of instances where very well-received animation was outsourced and no one talks about it because a lot of the key animation was done in the original studio and stuff like that. It's more complicated than it appears. People will say stuff like the budget ran out, and that's not always true. Sometimes it's not about money. Sometimes it's about time. But in this case, it very much feels like, actually, in this case, it probably was that the budget got obliterated partway through the project and they couldn't plan it out appropriately. Whatever it was a crime against art if Japanese manga and anime counted as art, which it does not.
I'm glad you stuck the landing on that one.
Yeah, no worries. I was always going there.
Finally, Cam X-Storm asks, in the recent Tell Us with Metellus, Josh Metellus asks teammates about the most famous person in their phone. Addison alluded to recently FaceTiming a certain edgelord billionaire. Given this and previous other mishaps, how concerned should we be about his decision-making?
Okay, can I say something real quick? On the Minnesota football party, they asked, like, who's the most famous person in your phone? And I was like, oh, the easiest way to do this would be like a non-sports person. And no one else kind of picked up that I said that. Fine. Okay. They all said sports people. Great. But I was like, probably Chelsea Manning. And Sam had no idea who that was. And so was just unimpressed. And I need feedback, James.
That is, this is not the first time I've heard of you, like, interacting with Chelsea Manning, and literally every time that you bring it up, it blows my mind that is something that you just do casually. There's no reason for it. Like,
I don't understand it.
It's just like
I could just send her a text, be like, "Hey, what do you think about this story about the election?" And she'll be like, "I don't know. It seems like there's some cybersecurity problems there." Like, she'll just answer. Like, I don't. Why?
That'd be like me having Snowden in my phone. Like, why? Why would this be like a random connection that I would have? So, yeah.
So Sam was like, Ron, because we brought Ron Johnson on for the next segment. Ron, all of our answers were unimpressive. And it took like all of me to be like, Sam, just because you don't know who this is doesn't mean it doesn't rip. It just rules. Again, I don't understand it. And I'm constantly worried that at some point she's going to be like, wait, what the hell are we doing? Bye. Right? Like, I have like a book to sell or whatever, right? I'm going to be like on CNN. What are you doing? Right? Like, I don't understand it. But so that was just like me being like, I wanted to check on that, James, because like that feels crazy to me that he was like, whatever. Anyway, so should we be concerned about Addison's decision making? Yeah, extremely. What are we talking about? Of course, nothing to do with Elon Musk. Also, now that we've got the Elon Musk information in here, I am curious about what that means, because you can just have someone's number in your phone and have it not mean anything. My roommate has a number of famous people's numbers in his phone. It doesn't mean anything. He could text them and they're not going to answer, right? One of them might. Whole different thing. But a lot of people have famous people's numbers. It's just not going to mean anything. So I don't know, But he said, do you want to FaceTime Elon, suggesting that actually would work? In which case, why? Like, I know Elon he presents himself as busier than he is, but certainly he is busier than that, especially now. Like, what? Okay, so presumably because he can FaceTime Elon, he's not getting catfished by someone? I mean,
I would have to assume that since he can FaceTime, yes.
Right. Like, unless someone is using Elon's AI to mimic Elon in a bid to trick Jordan Addison. I mean, Jordan Addison did win the Blitnikoff when he was at Pitt, and then he transferred to USC, which is, in California, which is, I guess, where Elon was for a while. He's in Texas now. Being the best receiver in college football, maybe that's enough, but he doesn't seem like a football guy. I don't know. Maybe Addison really likes Teslas, and that slipped under my radar. But it's not like he was driving a Tesla in either of these two incidents, right?
Yeah.
Also, in theory, the second incident wouldn't have happened because he falls asleep. It would have driven him home, right? But I don't know what that's about. That's weird. That's really weird.
Well, with that confusion, that will be the end of this episode of Norse Code. If you guys haven't
Matt
enjoyed
Daniels
it.
has Denzel Washington, and I was less confused about that.
I liked that Kevin O'Connell still had Brady, and he's like, but
yeah, I was like, he's going to say Brady, and yeah, okay.
He's like, yep, obviously I'm going to have Brady, but I also got Kenny Chesney, and between the two,
that ruled.
Yeah. That's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have enjoyed it. Arif, what do you have to plug?
So I hired an editor. Crazy. But he's looking over that story. I've been teasing this for like 2 weeks now about my reaction to the election and stuff like that. Hopefully I'll be able to publish that Monday or Tuesday after all the edits are done. It's just awkward timing because there's not really a good time in the week to publish this sort of thing, because like Monday is usually like your reaction to the game. We'll see. But we do have Luke's piece on how the Jaguars used cover 2 to smother Justin Jefferson, and whether or not that is like some sort of systemic problem with the Vikings, or whether we're getting tricked by the numbers or whatever. So he's got that piece over at Wide Left. Check that out over at wideleft.football. Also, a bunch of people moving over to Blue Sky. Mina Kimes is there, Nate Tice is there, Benjamin Solak, Bill Barnwell. Ton of people have been moved over to Blue Sky. So again, I'm Arif at Blue Sky or bsky.social. I also just took arifasantnfl.bsky.social, but it just redirects to Arif, just because I didn't want anyone like squatting on that one. So there's that. And someone was like, I'm surprised you didn't take Arif at wideleft.football, which I can do. That is their version of verification, because I have to change something in my website to allow that to happen, which is a nice form of verification. I'm thinking about doing that. So that could change in the future. But right now, arif.bsky.social. So check that out over there. It is much nicer. Otherwise, check me out at arifasantnfl on Twitter.
So that is going to be it for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back on Monday night to discuss, hopefully, the victory over the Titans. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember, it's 3rd and 22. I think they're really going to run here. And like both times tonight, they did. And we'll be back. We'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of... and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or at my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merch. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
All things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.